Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start just with a bit about my background and why I'm here today. So prior to Zendesk, I started two companies where I was actually very involved in all aspects of our customer experience. I spent a lot of time building that experience with the help of software. And in doing that, one of the important lessons I learned was how important it was to go with best in breed software. So find the best tools for the purpose that you need. And so outside my startups, I also was a partner at an incubator here in San Francisco called Founders Den. And when I saw the opportunity to build out Zendesk's startup partnership program, I couldn't resist. And given my experience as a founder and as a partner there, and because Zendesk is widely regarded as the best at what it does, I just couldn't pass up that opportunity to come and join and do this. So currently today, I manage all of our partnerships with VCs, accelerators around the globe for Zendesk as part of that, the Zendesk for Startups program. So, and today we're going to be talking about customer experience-led growth. Now, I want to first start out by talking about what we're all aspiring to here, right? Like everyone who's building a startup is trying to build a company that can grow someday into a unicorn. And everything I'm going to talk about today is within that context. So I definitely want to start there. At Zendesk, our focus is on customer experience-led growth. And as we'll see today, companies like Amazon have already demonstrated what that means. And it's a growing trend, and I think something that's going to be really important. So what I want you to take away from this is customer experience tactics, tools, and strategies that are used by some of the fastest growing startups based on analysis that we've done. And hopefully you'll walk away with some actionable insights today. So the reason we're able to show you all this is because Zendesk builds software for customer engagement. We've been doing it since 2007. However your customers reach out to you, whether it's email, phone, chat, self-service, if you're expecting to have a lot of them, you're going to need a way to manage that. And Zendesk is kind of like a secret recipe that helps you offer a much better integrated customer service more efficiently and without compromising the experience of your customers. And many of the unicorns you know today also grew up on Zendesk. And because of this, we actually have access to some insights into what some of the most innovative companies have been doing across the world for their customer experience. And Zendesk has seen inside more CX departments at startups than anybody else. And because of that, we're able to study this and understand what works and what doesn't. So today we're going to focus on a study we did of 4,400 startups and some of the interesting things that we found. And now what are we trying to ultimately do with this data? It all comes down to the fact that justifying investing in customer experience is hard. It's a difficult thing to do. And that's because customer experience is viewed as a cost center generally, not a growth lever. But that is changing. Customer support isn't just about fielding questions and handling returns as part of your cost center. A differentiated customer experience can really be part of your growth strategy. It can be a growth lever for you. If you look at Amazon, that's a great example of a company that leads with customer experience-led growth. And one of the reasons why they do well against their competition is because of the experience that you have when you go back to them and buy from them. And I like to ask the question, how often do you think people out there will buy the same product at Amazon at the same price instead of somewhere else, just because of shipping speeds and the assurances you'll get that if you have any issues getting your product, they'll replace it. So there's a lot to go there around their customer experience, and that's really what's driven a lot of their success. So good question is, why is this more important now than ever? And I'm going to get into some of those details here. So it might make your stomach churn a little bit, but this is going to emphasize why customer service is so important. And that's that today it's a buyer's world. Businesses have lost the power that they once had and it's a buyer's world. And what does that mean? So let's think back to what life was like before the internet. The internet took off and made it so much easier for people to buy things and get access to products anywhere. But on the flip side, for businesses, in the mid 2000s, as we started to adapt to the internet, more and more companies were just building whatever they could. And so during that time and over the last 20 years, we've just seen a huge decrease in the cost of building a business and starting something. As you all know, it's a lot easier to start a company today. In addition, it's a lot easier to market to customers today than it was 20 years ago, because you have the internet, you have different channels that you can access them through, all kinds of social media apps where you can get right in front of your exact customer. And so the cost to go to market is also going down. And so what does that mean? That really means that as a result, the average company today, starting out, has 4 to 5x more competitors than they did 20 years ago. So the impact of that is that your customer acquisition cost is going up. So it's much more expensive now to acquire a customer than it was 7 years ago. It's 70% more expensive. This data comes from Profitwell. It's part of their 2019 customer acquisition cost study. And this isn't just for direct-to-consumer startups, but also a trend among B2B companies. So don't think that you're safe just because you're B2B or if you're direct-to-consumer. A lot of companies are faced with this issue of customer acquisition costs going up. Profitwell, by the way, is a Boston-based company that has access to billing and customer subscription data more than anyone else in the world. And this is what they found from their research, that we've seen this gradual increase pretty quick increase actually over the last 7 years or so. So definitely let that sink in for a second. Now, with increased competition, increased customer acquisition costs, we think about businesses that are product led, and I think that the reason why being CX led is important is that with all these channels, more competition than ever, the value to the customer of the product is actually decreased. And so customers value the product 60 to 80% less than they used to. And you can see that in their willingness to pay. So customers are now valuing same features for a lot less than they used to, and they're less willing to pay for the same things that they used to pay for. And so we're seeing that both in core features and the value of integrations and stuff like that. So leading with product is becoming much harder. And on top of that, of course, customers are also a lot harder to please than they used to be. They have a lot more higher expectations than they ever have. And as a result, we're seeing NPS is down overall. And so you're seeing fewer happy customers today among companies than we did years ago. So this is a trend that we're seeing, decreasing each year in NPSs. And for those that aren't familiar, NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. It's a tool for understanding how much customers appreciate and want to promote your product. And so that's not the best trend to see. So that kind of leaves me with the question of, well, does that get you excited or what? Hopefully it's not all bad news, and we've got some opportunities here, and I want to get into that here with some of the things that we're learning here at Zendesk. So success in business is simple. It basically comes down to how do you acquire and retain a customer. So it's clear that acquisition is harder than ever. If we were improve, but just think about the thought experiment. If you were to improve your acquisition by 1% or your retention by 1%, how does that move the needle? And basically, what is the impact of your overall revenue? So Profitwell did another study on this and found some really interesting stuff, knowing kind of this current market. So in this new age, if we can increase in retention by 1%, it has almost a 4x greater impact on revenue than doing the same thing on acquisition. So we can't stop, acquiring companies, that has to happen, or sorry, acquiring customers, that has to happen. But that's more core to the business. That's table stakes. What we really need to do is realize the impact on revenue of those customers by prioritizing customer experience and making sure that you can bring them coming back and retain them once you've acquired them. A lot of companies use their venture funding to go out and buy customers these days, especially the companies that are raising lots of money. In many cases, a lot of that money really just goes straight to customer acquisition. But once you've acquired those customers, if you really want to grow to be a unicorn, you've got to be able to retain them and keep them coming back for more. So it's clear that investing CX has a significant impact on revenue. But it leaves us with the question, does it also lead to growth? And we wanted to find out. So we went under the hood and looked at our existing customers. Zendesk overall has over 160,000 customers around the globe. And we narrowed down from that list to the startups. And from there, we found that we've got about 4,600 companies that we were able to examine as part of a cohort that started in January 2014. So these are just research done on startups. And what we did was we looked at two factors. We broke them up into two categories: high growth companies and those that didn't experience high growth or were relatively stagnant startups. And what we did is we wanted to look and see what separated these two, and we wanted to understand is, what was the correlation between investing in more a better CX and growing faster. We were asking the question: are high growth startups investing the same way as the stagnant ones? Or are they are they just getting lucky on acquisition, or is there a difference in the way that they handle the customer experience? So we took a look under the hood, and what we came out with is some tactics, strategies, and tools that these high growth companies that are growing at a much higher rate than the stagnant ones have employed. So only 20 of you will likely do this. But if you do, those that employ these tactics and strategies will see an outsized return. So the first thing that you do, and if you only do one thing after this, it's when you're launching, you're starting to work your customers, get out of email and use a tool. So that's probably the most important thing, the biggest key takeaway here, and start sooner than later. If you feel like you need a tool, then you're probably behind the ball on that. So our advice here is get out in front of it, make sure you set up the tool before you start seeing that increase in customer support requests and needing to engage with your customers. And what we see here is that high growth companies are 33% more likely to add support in their first year than the companies that tend to be a bit more stagnant and don't see that growth. So that's a really important differentiation there. And so, what does that look like as a founder? You really need to decide when the right time is. One of the tips we have here is just the name test. Can you still name all of your customers? If you can name your customers one by one, then you're probably okay just continuing to interact with them individually over email. But once you get to the point where, like in this example, you can't think of all of your customers' names, it means that you probably need to start implementing a support tool. So we definitely believe in that, and it's super important to have that set up. And some of the great things that a support tool brings for you is the ability to connect with your customers in different places, all from one application, centralizes any of the questions they have. It allows you to organize and route different types of questions to different people on your team. You can also manage the tickets from so there's a ticketing system built into the support tool that allows you to see a support request and the current status of that and track it through until it gets solved. So you'll always be able to see what's still open, what isn't. And it's just a lot easier to do in the support tool than it is to try and do this out of your email inbox. One of the other features of implementing a support tool is also our ability to communicate with them, as I mentioned, across different channels. And that's the second thing that we looked at and noticed. So the second takeaway from the research we did of the startups was basically to make sure that you're meeting them where they are, and we call that omnichannel. It's the ability to communicate with your customers regardless of what platform or tool that they're using to connect with you. Some customers are going to email you. Some want to go onto your website and get into a live chat. Some would like to message you on social media or complain to you on Twitter, whatever it is, wherever your customers are trying to reach out to you. It's really important that you're able to respond to them. And what we see is that 33% of startups that are growing fast are 33% more likely to add different support channels within their first 2 years. So if you think about it, if you're getting your support set up in your first year, by your second year, you should also have the ability to communicate with your customers where they are. So if your customers want to reach out to you on WhatsApp or email or chat, wherever, if you get that set up early, you'll be in a much better place to succeed. And again, I'm reminded that customers are hard to please, and high growth companies really helped themselves by allowing their customers to talk where they wanted and not forcing them just to email or missing a comment or something. So, here's an example where, customers trying to reach out to you on a messaging app or on a social media app. And if you don't have anyone manning that, it's really difficult to track all those requests. What Zendesk allows you to do is that these messages will actually show up in your support system. And as a result, you can really build in to your customer support. You can build into your support that experience of being able to respond to them and even include a chatbot and initiate different macros that streamline your support operations. And it folds into your normal customer support. So whether they reach out to you on Instagram or by email or chat, however they contact you, it still shows up the same way to you as a customer issue that you're trying to resolve. And so this is really important to make sure to have that set up. Now, another example here is one that doesn't really work, where you have customers that try to reach you, and then your response to them is just, please contact support at. Well, they've already tried to contact you, so why send them somewhere else to contact you when they're already contacting you, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish here by building a support system that allows you to reach out and respond to your customers where they are. Now, the third thing that we noticed was to use live chat and to also staff it. So that's pretty important. So both of those are two important things that a lot of these high growth companies that we see are doing. So what does that mean? They're 20%, the high growth companies are 20% more likely to add live chat by the second year. So what we're seeing here is that if within your first 2 years, you should start thinking about how are you going to be able to respond to customer inquiries live in real time. I think this is pretty important, especially when you're very early in your product development process. Having a real-time feed of the things that your customers are seeing when they're in your mobile app or they're on your website is super important. And this isn't, I think, just about customer experience here, but also about your ability to continue to iterate and drive your product vision forward. So that's important. And yes, they also staffed it well. And what I mean by that is what we see is that about those high growth companies see about 16% more agents assigned to live chat on average than the stagnant companies. And so that's a huge difference from what we see, and that's consistent at different phases of their development, where the high growth companies are seeing that more agents on staffed. And you can see this here as it changes from day one all the way up to 24 months out. Now, the fourth thing is self-service, and startups do it, that they grow fast, do this immediately. And what I mean by that is, 27% of them are more likely to start adding self-service content within the first 24 months. I apologize that I think I may have accidentally deleted the chart here, but trust me that it's there's 27% more self-service content in those first 24 months. Actually, here's the chart, sorry. And so what that means, self-service content, is putting information up that customers are looking for, FAQs, help centers. What we found in our research is about 90% of customers expect to be able to resolve questions on their own without having to contact support. And this is probably one of the most important things you can do as a startup, as a founder, is to start to implement that on day one, and try as much as you can to steer customers away from contacting you and then towards self-service. And so that's something that's pretty important as you grow your business. And if you get started and build good habits around that very early, you're going to help yourself deflect a lot of questions. When I started my first company, a lot of these FAQ tools didn't exist. It wasn't easy to build websites. The easiest thing, and this is in 2008, the easiest thing at the time I could figure out for an FAQ was a blog. And I started to write a blog post every time I got a question that I couldn't, that someone was asking, or multiple people were asking me. And as a result of that, that blog, I was able to steer a lot of people just to the blog to answer the questions. And within the first couple of years of building that business, that blog became one of the more widely read blogs in the industry that I was in. So this is super important. It's been meaningful to me. And now there's some really great tools that allow you to manage that. And so we think about the 600-second rule. So agents generally spend about 10 minutes per day creating a new help article. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, writing the article, describing the issue, describing the response. And that's a big challenge if you're doing it, especially if you're trying to publish it on a static website or in a blog or whatever. But one of the great things that Zendesk does is this is built into your support tool. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like when a customer writes in, they're having an issue, and you're like, well, this is a common issue. You can either go into your FAQs and drop it in and respond to the customer really quickly. But also when you get a question that you are realizing this is something that we need to do an FAQ about, you can easily just click a couple buttons, create the response that you would give to the customer, and turn that into an FAQ right out of your support tool. So this is going to save your team a lot of time doing that. And that's a really great part of the the value that having a good support tool can bring, is that integration with your self-serve. So finally, I do want to get into talking a little bit about the unicorns. So we spent a little bit of time talking today about high growth companies versus a stagnant one. So of those 4,600 companies that we looked at, determining who was high growth, who was stagnant, that was kind of two ways to bucket the customers that we were looking at, the startups that we were looking at in our system. The other way to think about it is, all right, let's carve out the subsection of those high growth companies that actually went on to become unicorns. And so let's take a look at what that was. And what we found there is that they basically did the same things, but faster. So even faster than what we had talked about, in the previous slides here. So for example, Omnichannel, in the first 2 years, once again, those unicorns are meeting their customers where they are. They're 14% faster in getting Omnichannel set up and getting that for their customers. On self-service, they're 41% faster. So in the first 2 years, they're implementing self-service tools, getting that up and running much faster than anyone else. And then live chat is 32% faster. So that would be something that we're seeing in the first 2 years amongst unicorns. And then just the other thing that we noticed about those unicorns is, I know sometimes we forget that phone support is a thing these days. I certainly detest actually making a phone call to customer support. It's probably like one of the worst experiences, and always try to default to sending a message. But there are times where, and there are certain customers who much prefer phone support, and that's something that the unicorns tend to do. They have to implement phone support, and they're doing it 33% faster in those first 2 years than anyone else. So in summary, as we talked about these different trends that we see, the first thing, again, making sure that you get that customer support tool set up. And there's a variety of different ways to do that. In my experience, implementing software, one of the hard lessons I learned was picking the wrong tools for the need. Sometimes, my objective when I first started my first company was I wanted to have everything in one software tool. And I tried to do that. It was really ambitious. And I thought maybe I would have my sales, my support, our financial accounting, everything in the same tool. So it was all in one place. And it was an amazing dream. But unfortunately, the hard lessons I've learned is that if you try to take a tool that's meant for A and use it for B, you're going to get yourself into some trouble. And there are a lot of tools that try to claim that they can do all in one. But the reality is that they're all just separate applications that are generally lumped together and packaged as a single product. And so what I've found over the years, and what's really great about the way, software and businesses have evolved, is you hear a lot about integrations, and I think a lot of the progress made in the last decade or so has been around these connector apps that connect data from one system to another and help you make those best in breed tools work together. So I think we're seeing that, as you are in a position to look at software and your software stack, the wonderful thing is that you no longer have to look at them in silos where you have I need to decide, do I take my best sales tool here and my best support tool here, and have to just accept that they're going to live in two different places, or do I go and buy a great sales tool that has a crummy support solution attached to it, or a great support tool that has a crummy sales solution attached to it, and make compromises. And what's great is that you no longer have to make that choice, because all of these systems are super well connected. And I think that's an important thing as you think about, your support tools. And for me, again, having spent the last, 15 years working in Silicon Valley, I've seen a lot of startups grow up. I've worked at several startups, including the two that I co-founded. And what I found is that, Zendesk was always widely regarded as the best tool for customer support. And that the fact that you can now connect it with other systems very easily makes life a lot easier in terms of making that decision as to what tool you're going to use for the purpose. So getting that tool set up early is super important. Now with Omnichannel, what I love about where Omnichannel is going for us is that it's, at its core, it's just the ability to communicate with your customers wherever they are, whatever application they're in, whatever platform, social media platform they might be using, wherever you want to put yourself in a position to communicate with your customers, that exists. But I think what I love about where it's heading is the concept of conversational experiences. And what I mean by that is that, in a text message, you're usually just communicating with someone back and forth. It's very informal, it's quick, and you can be super responsive. When you move someone to email, it's like, well, I need to take the time to write a proper email and send that. And so your communication tends to be a bit more happening, asynchronously on a delay than in real time. But what we're building out with Omnichannel, and with the help, because of the fact that a lot of these are more messaging oriented or text message oriented, what you're seeing is the ability to communicate with your customers and have that conversation continue going, instead of opening up a chat that you would have with customer support. If you imagine it as a consumer, everybody here is a consumer. You can have a conversation with someone. When that chat closes out, you lose all the history, right? And then you have to start all over the next time you go in. Well, we're changing that so that when customers are reaching out to you and you are messaging them in one place on the chat, and then let's say they close out their browser, and when they come back, that chat is still there. They can see the chat history as if it was just a text message chain. Your agents on the back end will be able to see the whole history and continue the conversation. They won't have to like go check with somebody else, or it's just one unified experience. And that's where the omnichannel is going. And of course, the third point is chat and staffing the chat. So thinking about how you're going to set up a system for getting people to engage in real time with customers. And again, there's two needs here, right? The very early days, when you're first developing your product, I think it's really great to set this up and you get those early users in and they're chatting you in real time about what their experience is while using your product. Allows you to really understand what's going on and collect some very useful information as you're building your product in the early days. But then of course there's a phase later on where you've launched and things have gotten a bit more serious with your customer support operations, and you can actually start to staff a team that is doing live chat with your customers. So that's pretty important. And then lastly, self-service. I mentioned my own personal experience, setting up a blog to do FAQs. Luckily today, the FAQ product that we have that's built into our support tool it's a really great product. You'll get insights into who's reading what articles, and it really help you drive your business forward. So if you have a pretty robust FAQ, at any given point in time, you can go into the tool and get the analytics on, which FAQs are people asking the most. And that's really powerful. And the other great thing about setting that up sooner is that the more FAQs that you have, it becomes the foundation for any AI or automations that you want to build. So AI-based automations or chatbots. We call ours the answer bot is the built-in one at Zendesk, but you can also implement AI tools from third parties into your Zendesk support system that will read through your FAQs. And when customers ask questions, they'll try to suggest the right FAQs. And over time, those bots will get better and better. So if you do this early, set it up, and are always adding FAQs, eventually you can get to a place where most of your customer support requests that come in are solved by your FAQs, and the ones that aren't solved by the FAQs, where someone skips past that, the chatbot will refer them back to the FAQ before your customer support team ever has to worry about answering the question. So those are some of the really powerful things you can do once you start to set up self-service. And that's something that, if as a founder, when you're trying to do more with less, I think that's a really important thing to think about. So those are the things that we've learned from working with the companies over the last few years. Of course, I'd also would be remiss not to mention, our program, the startup program here at Zendesk. Through our relationship with Hero House, all of the founders get access to our product. If you're a new customer, 6 months free. But we also have incredible support. Our team is here to help startups get this set up and to do it right from the beginning. So that's something that's super important to us. We want to make sure that you get off on the right foot. And I truly believe that, the discount is great, but the discount is temporary. Getting your customer support set up right is really what matters. And that's going to set you up for years to come. So, we certainly would love to be there to help you as you need it. And feel free to apply through Hero House and reach out to us if you have any questions. And of course, this is my email address. I'm happy to take any questions that you have. So I'm just going to look through the comments real quick. A question about whether or not we can get a report or video of the recording. We can certainly record this, or I think we are recording it, and I think we can get this out to you. If not, I know we have a similar recording that we can have. And then as a startup grows, how should the founders adjust their CX strategy? I think that's a good question. It's a pretty broad question. I think that the way I would approach this is that In the early days, I mean, the first thing you want to be thinking about is when are you going to launch and when are you going to start having to communicate with your customers, right? So get out ahead of that and know when that's going to happen and understand what you want to do at launch. I would say that when I'm talking to founders, first-time founders are figuring this out as they go along. When I started my second company, the best part about that was that there were all these like things I spent a lot of time trying to figure out my first time around. But the second time around, I already knew. Like I knew what HR software I was going to use. I knew what support and CRM tools I was going to use. I already had those answers. Whereas when you're a first-time founder, you spend a lot of time figuring out what's the right tool for this, the right tool for that, and again, I always say that finding best in breed software, like try and focus on what's the best tool for the purpose that you're trying to achieve. So like if you need a marketing automation tool, go out and find what's the best marketing automation tool. If you need a support solution, find that. And so what I found in working with founders, particularly those that have already done this before, is usually the ones that have done this before are just like, all right, we're launching in 3 months. We need to have Zendesk set up before then. And it's like not a lot of deliberation or worrying about it. If it's your first time, you've never done this before, you might be on the fence about whether or not you'll launch with a support tool and have it ready ahead of time, or maybe you'll wait and see how things go at launch. And then once you've launched, then you set it up. I don't think there's one right way to do it, but I would just say that like in some cases, I think just there are things you can control when you're a founder and there's things you can't. And I would say that the founders that have done this before, for them, it's just like, okay, I'm not gonna leave myself to worry about this later after we've launched. I'm gonna set it up ahead of time. So that's the first thing. Once you've launched, your goal is to figure out how to handle a large number of incoming customer requests. Ideally, right? You want to have a lot of customer inquiries. It means you're growing, and you're not going to have a team on day one. So, as a scrappy founder, you're probably not going to hire a 20-person customer support team on, before you launch and have customer support questions. You'll probably, maybe have one person assigned to it. Maybe you're doing it when you launch. And so the CX strategy in the early days is really around what are the tools and what are the ways that I can do more with less, right? So that's where I think about setting up the self-service guide, any chatbots that I can use or AI tools that I can use to streamline the conversations with the customers, and then making sure that customers can just reach out to me and I have a system set up and ability to respond. So that's like the basics. At some point, you go from launching and getting those initial customer support requests to a place where you actually have a team, and you're going to need a team to staff. And now you're shifting from, okay, how do I just handle a large number of incoming requests, to how do I grow a team and manage a team, and get them all working together and collaborating. And so that's when your strategy starts to shift to what are the ways to make the team more efficient. And then you start to think about, automations, macros, different things that streamline the responses that you're sending to your customers and might reassign things to other people. You're thinking about how you're going to do analytics and reporting to make sure you're measuring the quality of the customer support that you're giving out. Like, what are your response times? Are you meeting your service level agreements with your customers in terms of how quickly you're going to respond to them, and being able to understand, which agents, if you have different agents that you want to have focus on certain types of things versus others, routing the tickets to the right people, and then just making sure that they're being followed up in timely manners, depending on the type of customer support request. So your CX strategy starts to change a little bit more, where you're thinking about, okay, how do we as the incoming requests continue to grow, and we have a team now responding to that, how do we manage that team as that grows? And then, at some point, you also will start to get to a point where you're thinking about outsourcing some of your customer support, and then, thinking about what your broader CX strategy looks like, where it's no longer just the startups that you're working, the people at your startup, but you're going to need to do time zone and language support around the globe, and thinking about different ways to do that. There's some built-in tools with Zendesk where you can do translation, so you can build translation into it. So I can get a ticket, in German, and then even though I don't speak German, I can have it translated, and then I can write a response, and then that response can get translated and sent back to the customer. So there's ways to do this, but that's certainly something you're going to want to think about, is being available on different time zones, and thinking about as you scale across the globe, different languages as well. Next question is, what are the cheapest strategies that startups can implement to improve their CX? Cheapest. I mean, I think that when you're launching, I think the hard thing is that we're not a customer acquisition tool, right? So when you're looking at customer acquisition tools, it's a lot easier to justify the expense. And so what I want to emphasize here is that even though we're not helping you grow your customer base, and this is something I talked about earlier, is the importance of being able to retain your customers once you've spent a lot of money on acquiring them, is a reason why there's a ton of value in investing in CX. The cheapest way, the absolute cheapest way to do this is to have a shared Google Doc with FAQs and an email inbox, a shared email inbox that, maybe it's support@yourcompany.com, and it just goes into a shared email inbox that your whole team is responding out of. That'd probably be the first thing to do and get set up. And then at least you're starting to implement some of the best practices, even though you're not necessarily using a tool quite yet. So there's definitely ways to do this without a tool. But when those requests start increasing, and again, you get to the point where you don't know your individual customers by name, I think that's when it's really important to start thinking about a tool to do that stuff. For Zendesk, in terms of cheapest way to do it, we do have some basic setup. So you can, most of what we offer is our suite of tools, which includes the FAQ. It includes the different omnichannel support, and all the different features are part of our suite. But we also have a package that's just our support tool only, and that's basically email support and ticketing. So from that perspective, that would be the cheapest way to get started. But if you're really looking to do this without spending any money, you just would start with a shared email inbox, and then either a web page or a Google Doc that you keep up to date and can share with your customers as your FAQ. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, I think that's a wrap then. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation. Please feel free to reach out to us. Again, our team is here and ready to support startups and help you out however we can. So thank you all again.